Good afternoon. My name is Ameer Blackmon. Again, I'm with the State Attorney General's Office with Education and Outreach. On behalf of Attorney General Kathleen Kane, just like to thank you for giving us this time to talk to you on a little bit about senior crime prevention. Now, one thing that not a lot of people know is Pennsylvania actually ranks 4th in the country in our makeup of our senior population. Because we rank so high, we're actually the target for a lot of would-be scams and frauds that target seniors. So we know that one of the biggest things we can do to defend against that is education. So the goal of what we call Senior Crime Prevention University is to make you what we call AAA certified. And by AAA certified, it means first we want to make you aware of some of the scams and frauds that are going on. And once you're aware, we want to make sure you're able to avoid those scams and frauds, And then thirdly, if you are to come across one of these things, we want to make sure you alert the proper authorities. So that's what we mean by AAA certified. So we're going to talk about a few things today, starting with charitable contributions, moving on to sweepstakes and lotteries, estate planning, checks and money orders, home improvements, account verification, power of attorney, and closing remarks from our Attorney General. So before we get started, I do want to give you our opening remarks from Attorney General Kane.
Hello, I'm Pennsylvania Attorney General Kathleen Kane. As senior citizens, you're part of a distinguished group that represents millions of Pennsylvanians. You've taught our children, fought for our freedom, and helped to build the communities that we enjoy today. Unfortunately, the number of con artists and thieves who look to prey on you has increased dramatically. Scam artists often invent new twists to old schemes faster than we can alert you. That's why my Elder Abuse Unit has created the Senior Crime Prevention University to educate you and to enlist your help in putting an end to the fraud and deceptive practices of these thoughtless criminals. You're about to hear real stories about several individuals who unfortunately were victimized by con artists. These situations occur all too often across the Commonwealth. They include everything from home improvement scams to identity theft, to fake checks and fraudulent mailings. Our goal is to help prevent you from becoming a victim by learning the signs that may indicate a fraud. Listen to their stories and decide if the individual was scammed or not.
Okay, so when we talk about charitable contributions, I want to ask you guys a question. And I want to put some pressure on you because so far nobody has gotten this question wrong anywhere I've gone. So there's a little pressure on you. But it never fails. You get to the house at the end of a long day. You're ready to sit down and relax. Make your dinner, favorite drink, sit down, turn the TV on. As soon as you kick your feet up, what always happens?
Phone rings.
Phone rings, exactly. See, still nobody's gotten that question wrong. So the phone rings, and on the phone is someone from a charitable organization or who claims to be a charitable organization, and they want your money. But how do you know that it's a charity you want to invest in or that it's a viable charity in the first place? All right, so let's take a look at this scenario, and then we'll talk a little bit about charitable contributions.
My mother lives alone, and she takes care of herself, and she's pretty independent, but I always check in on her, making sure she's okay. At my mom's request, I recently went through her checking account and her account balances, and I noticed that she was giving a lot of money out to these different charities. I noticed that there were a lot of charities on there, and some of them were the same ones over and over again. They were getting money from my mom every single month, and I was curious, why are they contacting her so often? Was this a scam?
So what do we think? Is that a scam?
It sounds like it.
Sounds like it. The thing is, we probably don't have enough information just yet to say that it's a scam, but there's definitely enough information to cause us to have some red flags. So when it comes to charitable contributions, how do you protect yourself? Well, the very first thing I'm going to tell you is to know who you're speaking to. That's whether it's over the phone or over the email or computer or even a knock at the door. Know who you're talking to. So now when I say know who you're talking to, is it good enough to simply ask the person on the other end of the line, who is this? Like, does that work?
No.
Probably not. They can tell you anything, exactly. How about your caller ID? So if you check your caller ID and it matches up, is that good information?
No.
It used to be.
Possibly, used to be. Right, so there's new technology out now called spoofing.
Sure.
What spoofing does is it allows the person on the other end of the line to dictate what your caller ID says. So your caller ID might say Sears, or it might say a local charity. In actuality, it could be somebody next door. All right, so you can't just go by your caller ID. So how do you tell who you're talking to? There's a few tools you have at your disposal. First thing we usually say is you can let the person on the phone know, listen, I don't give over the phone, and I need to get some more information about your organization before I decide to give anything. What you can do is you can mail me your annual financial statement. Why is it good to get the annual financial statement? There's a couple reasons. Number one, all the information you need about that organization is going to be in their annual financial statement. So how much they pay their employees, how much of your contribution actually gets to the charity, all that information is going to be in their financial statement. And that's important because a lot of charities use telemarketing organizations to do their calling. They have to pay those telemarketing organizations. They can pay them up to 85% of your contribution.
Wow.
So if you give $100, 85 of that could be going to this telemarketing organization and only 15 getting to your charitable organization. So you'll be able to tell that by looking at the annual financial statement. Another reason it's good to ask for the annual financial statement is because if it is a scammer, fraudster, somebody who doesn't really have a charity, they have lots of calls to make and they don't really have time to waste on people who ask a lot of questions and do their research. So a lot of times they'll just keep moving on. They won't continue to bother you. Another tool that you have at your disposal is you can call the Pennsylvania Department of State's Bureau of Charitable Organizations. Pennsylvania Department of State's Bureau of Charitable Organizations, every charity should be registered with them. So if you call them and check on the charity and that charity isn't registered with the Pennsylvania Department of State, then you know that's a red flag and it's probably not somebody you want to invest in. Big thing about when you want to give, if you do ever decide to give, number one, never give over the phone or over the computer. Make sure you give by check and give a receipt. Also, when you can, try to give locally. So you still want to do your research, but when you give locally, you can kind of reach out, touch the charity, see the type of work they're doing in the community, and it gives you another level of comfortability.
Why don't you want to do it online?
Online,
Yeah.
there's just,
Like the Alzheimer's Association, I sent it to.
right. The thing is, there's so
Our
many,
association.
there's some good organizations that are online, and everybody probably allows online donations now because that's the way the world is moving. But there's also a lot of fake stuff online. Click on the wrong link sometimes, or scammers will use logos that you're familiar with to fool you into thinking you're giving to a real charity or a real organization, and it'll be somebody fake. So it's more on just another way to confirm that you're giving to the right organization. If you make a checkout specifically to that organization and you get a receipt that gives you, again, another level of being comfortable with who you're giving to and who's receiving those monies. All right. Additional questions with that one? Thanks, good question. So when I talk about charitable contributions, I also talk about the do not call list. Is anybody here on the do not call list? Okay. So I always ask that question, and then sometimes I get a couple of moans and groans. But I like to go over it because there's a couple of misconceptions with the do not call list and a couple of ways to make it work a little bit better for you. So with the do not call list, it should cut down on the number of calls that you receive from keyword legitimate businesses. All right, so unfortunately, scammers don't always follow the rules, so you know, when they're doing those criminal type things, they're not looking at what the rules are. You can still get those calls. But it should cut down on the number of legitimate calls that you receive. A couple things with the do not call list. One is there's a state ran do not call list and there's a federal one. So I want to talk to you about the state one. First thing is, once you add your number to the do not call list, it actually only updates quarterly. So if you add your number and you're still getting calls for a couple weeks, that's okay. It may not have updated yet. Second thing is, once you add yourself to the do not call list, there's still a few types of organizations that can call you. Number one, you can still get government calls. Secondly, you can still receive calls from charities. And then thirdly, you can receive calls from anyone you've done business with in the last year. Now that one is a little bit tricky. I'll give you an example. Have you ever been to the mall or State Fair or something like that, and you see that shiny new car that's surrounded by the velvet ropes, and somebody's gonna win that car, right? And you fill out the information to win that car, and they ask you for a lot of information. They'll ask you for your name, address, date of birth, firstborn child, all this information, right? And you give it to them because you've already envisioned yourself driving that new car away. Unfortunately, no one ever wins that car. But what you've done is consider doing business with that organization. So now you're just giving that organization, who you don't really even know who they are a lot of times, permission to call you over the next year. The other thing about that is when you haven't verified the business that it is, businesses buy and sell your information all the time. So a lot of times when you give your information to somebody like that, they're selling it to another organization, and when you wonder, how did that company even get my information, that's how a lot of times. So you want to watch that and remember that when you do things like that, you're giving them permission to call you over the next year. Now, again, the do not call list should cut down on the number of legitimate business calls that you do receive. And there's a phone number that we have in our office. I'll get it for you after the presentation. But if you call that phone number, if you're still receiving calls, those companies can get fined if they're breaking the law on that. And if they're calling seniors, the fine is actually a little bit more. So you can report that type of thing to our office. All right, question?
Do you have to know a lot of information? Because I remember a few years ago, we were being bothered by one, but then when I looked into it, we had to know the name and their phone number and all these various details that I didn't necessarily have
Right.
when I wanted to call.
Yeah, I would call with the information you do have. The more you have, the more helpful it is, but we do understand that you're not always able to get all the information. Sometimes they're using robocall services or numbers that you can't call back directly, so it is a little bit troublesome with that. So the information that you do have, use that and give that to us.
If it was like an automated dialer, like you're saying, that wouldn't know not to call you, right? Anyone
No,
like
well,
that.
that.
And also, what if they're calling from Canada or something, does that apply up there?
Two good questions. First question was about if there's a robocall or will they know. It's that organization's responsibility to know who's on the do not call list. So if they're calling you, they're still out of compliance if you're on the do not call list, whether or not they use robocall or anything like that. Second question was a good one when it comes from calls coming from out of the country. So the thing with that is it's really hard to regulate calls that aren't coming from our country. And that's one of the bigger problems. I know they're working on ways to stop it or at least decrease it. And that's the kind of stuff that's still in the works. But it's really hard, pretty much impossible to regulate stuff from outside of the country. So when it comes to those types of calls, we do say, definitely don't give them any information, any of your personal information ever over the phone. It's fine with me if you hang up, I won't tell anybody. Or just don't pick up at all. As we continue to try to work on ways to make that decrease, just say use those tools that you have at your disposal. Yes, ma'am.
When you enroll on the do not call list, is that perpetual or do you have to do it every year?
Another good question. With the state do not call list, I think it's 2 years. So I have a pamphlet for you. I'll get that information. Additional questions with that? Yes, ma'am.
Well, this isn't contributions or anything. The latest one we got, and my son-in-law also had gotten, the person who called and said he's from the legal department of, the United States.
Okay.
And that there's a warrant out for
Mhm.
the person's address, and you must get right back to them, and blah, blah, blah. And, that can really scare people.
That can, you're correct. Something like that definitely sounds like a scam. What they're doing is trying to create in you some level of fear, that you're willing to call back as soon as you can. One really big call like that happens right now is the call from, they say they're the IRS, that you owe money and they're going to sue you, things like that. One thing you need to know is the IRS will never call you, all right? They'll send regular US certified mail to you. So if you ever get a call that says they're the IRS, a lot of the times they sound really angry and really aggressive and they're trying to scare you. But if you ever get a call like that, you know immediately it's a scam because the IRS won't call you. And they're definitely, a lot of times they'll tell you need to wire money or send money some type of way. And that's something you definitely need to be aware of. Never give your personal information, never send that out.
The person who called us had a distinct foreign accent. You know, and didn't pronounce some of his words too well, but
Sure,
we
yeah.
we didn't do, you know.
And that happens.
respond.
But you can report stuff like that to our office when you receive those
Okay,
calls.
we did speak to our local police, and he
That's
said
fine.
he'd heard a lot about that, but he didn't
Yeah, yeah.
take any
They,
action.
the thing with those, a lot of times is, it's like a piece of candy. So the candy remains the same, but the wrapper changes how they present it to you. So they might say, hey, we're the IRS and you owe us money. Or they might say, hey, we're Macy's calling about your credit card and try to get information that way. So the wrapper will change, but what's not changing is there's somebody who's calling you unsolicited. They're requesting either money or information from you, and usually they're trying to create a sense of urgency. So when you see those things starting to line up, now that whole looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, probably a duck. Yes, ma'am?
I've had someone call and say they're from IBM,
Mm-hmm.
and they detected a problem on my computer, and they need to access my computer.
Right.
And I said to them, well, that's strange, because I have an Apple computer.
Exactly.
They hung up.
Yep. So I've heard, that's the first time I've heard IBM, but I've heard, we're calling from Microsoft, and the same thing. We reported there's a problem with your computer, then they'll ask you for some specific information on your computer. Again, just don't give that personal information away, especially on the phone, especially unsolicited. Okay?
So
So,
a company big like IBM wouldn't operate that way.
Right.
You think they wouldn't? It
right,
wouldn't
just
be-
like the IRS wouldn't operate that way
Right.
of calling you, same thing, correct.
Are there any government agencies that will contact you by phone off the top of your head?
Not that I know of off the top of your head, it'll be US certified mail. Yeah. So if you do get something like that, always be skeptical. In the same way they'll do it with the phone, they could do it online. So it looks like an IRS website, but you might see like misspellings, or they're asking for information the IRS wouldn't ask you for, the PIN number for your debit card, something like that, right? So you want to watch that online and on the phone. Again, you don't want to give that personal information up, right?
They really think people are gonna give that to them on their phone?
Unfortunately, people
People
do
do.
sometimes. And if you call 100 people
Get one.
and 4 people give you information, you probably had a good day. Right? So,
How difficult is it now that with the internet and all, a lot of them are doing it from foreign countries over the internet and all. You don't stand a chance in hell getting your money back, do you? If you do something from somebody in India or somewhere that doesn't even barely speaks English.
well, the one thing we know about these types of scams and frauds is the best defense is education before it happens.
Sure.
Because a lot of times, even if we arrest the bad guys, which we do a lot,
You don't get it.
it's hard for you to get, retribution for the money you've already given out. So our goal is to get to you before that happens, so that there isn't the crime. All right. Additional questions? Okay, so I want to talk about lotteries and sweepstakes, which is next. I will give you personal information about myself as we go through this presentation, so that you can feel like you know me a little bit better. So again, my name is Ameer Blackmon. I am pretty obsessed with retirement. I will retire tomorrow if I can. Because of that, I invest in my retirement account daily. Might have heard of it. It's called the Pennsylvania Lottery. So I'm hoping to be able to retire pretty soon. I'll let you guys know how that goes.
Your 401K.
There you go. But even when it comes to sweepstakes and lotteries, there's a lot of tricky stuff that goes on. Has anybody here ever received that letter in the mail that says you're our grand prize winner? You won $100,000. A lot of people have received that.
Everyone got the same one.
Mhm. Everybody gets the same one, exactly. All right, so let's take a look at this scenario, and then we'll talk a little bit about lotteries and sweepstakes.
I recently received one of those prize sweepstakes in the mail. The kind that says you could be a winner, not you are a winner. You know, I'm always filling out those sweepstakes forms because I never know, it could be the time my name is going to be the winner. I guess I finally was a winner because I received this notice from the International Lottery that said I was a winner. All I had to do was pay taxes before I could receive it. And I thought, well, you pay taxes on a game show for the prizes, you pay taxes for the lottery in your own state, so I figured, I guess I was a winner.
What do we think? Was she a winner?
No.
They won.
All right, they won, exactly.
With
All
the
right.
lottery, they'll take it, taxes out before.
She made
they
the
send
day.
the check.
Exactly,
We-
exactly. So a couple of things when it comes to sweepstakes and lotteries. One of the big things with her was she couldn't keep track of everything she played because she played everything. So she really couldn't differentiate, which made her fall for a lot of things, all right? When it comes to these sweepstakes and lottery scams, I say to use what I call Ameer's common sense approach. So there's a couple common sense things. Number one, if you didn't play, you didn't win, right? So if somebody's sending you a letter out of nowhere that says you won, if you know you didn't play anything, obviously you didn't win. Secondly, if it sounds too good to be true, probably is, right? So anytime it seems like somebody's giving something away for nothing, or something that just sounds too good to be true, you know that it is too good to be true. Thirdly, you never have to pay in order to win a prize. So if anybody tells you you won the prize but you have to pay something, that should be a red flag for you. All right, you never have to pay in order to win a prize. Now, a couple other facts and kind of little things to have in your toolbox when it comes to these. A lot of them come from outside of the country. So some of the big places are Jamaica, Canada, and Nigeria. So they can come from other places, but that's where we see a lot of them come from. As a U.S. citizen, it's actually illegal for you to win any international prize like that. And the reason is because a lot of that stuff is scams, so it's really made to protect you, all right? So sometimes it'll get a little bit tricky. It might say it's some type of local lottery or local prize winning, the New Jersey lottery, and then when you look at the mail, you check the postage, it has Canada on the postage. Well, Canada probably doesn't send their mail through New Jersey to get to you, right? Or New Jersey doesn't send their mail through Canada to get to you. So if you see something like that, that should raise a red flag for you. So if you see international postage, you know, again. Now, what they'll do sometimes, again, to be a little bit tricky, is they'll send you the letter, and then they'll actually send you a check with the letter. Check looks good, feels good. You can probably envision yourself buying that yacht, right? So everything about it seems like it might be okay, but there's always strings attached. So they'll say, you're our $100,000 grand prize winner, but you have to pay taxes. We're gonna send you a check for $8,000. Send us back $4,000 and we'll send you the rest of your money. Once you send them that money, is there any other check coming? No. Is the check for $8,000 that they sent you gonna be good?
No.
Nope, you're gonna deposit it in your account. It's gonna eventually bounce, probably gonna mess up some other checks and all that other stuff that you have out there and just make for a really messy situation. So you wanna stay away from that. A lot of the times, they'll tell you to send them the money via wire. We all know what a wire is, like a Western Union or a MoneyGram. Go to your local supermarket or pharmacy. The moment you hear somebody say the word wire, run as fast as you can in the other direction. All right. Can't trace wires. You can't really follow them. They can be around the other side of the world in a matter of minutes. Once you send out that money, for the most part, it's gone. All right. So anytime somebody tells you to send them a wire, ask about a wire, anything like that, again, red flag, and you know you just shouldn't do that. Now, they know we're out telling people not to send wires. So the newest thing is the green dot money cards. Anybody heard of those?
Yes.
So the green dot money card, it looks like a regular debit or credit card. It'll have like a Visa or, a MasterCard logo on it. The way it works is you purchase the card from the store, usually be in the supermarket or pharmacy where the gift cards are. So you go, you'll purchase it, and then what you do is you load money onto it. What the bad guys will tell you to do is purchase it, load the money onto it, call them back, and give them the numbers to that card. Once you give them those numbers, are you ever going to see that money?
No.
No. Now, you may hear, not may, you probably will hear from the scammer again after you sent them that money, because they know they have a live one.
Yeah.
So what they'll do is once you send them money once, they'll keep trying. So they may say, guess what? You won the first lottery, you sent us the taxes back, but all those winners were put into another lottery, and it's your lucky day, you won that one too. Now you just have to send us $7,000, right? So it'll keep going as long as you're staying into it.
Been a lot of
Okay.
Do people actually do this? They actually send money?
Unfortunately, people do. A lot of times, we had, there was a story, I was talking to one of the local senators, somebody in his office, and he said they had a situation where a lady was called up, she was told that it was the IRS calling, she owed all this money. She needed to get it right away, but if she did get it to them right away, they take it easy on her, they wouldn't arrest her. And they had her convinced, she got in the car, she was getting in the car. Person told her, stay on the cell phone the whole time, so I can make sure you sent it. Really, he wanted to stay on the cell phone the whole time to make sure she didn't talk to anybody else that would let her know that was a scam. So she was getting in the car, and she said, oh wait, I'm babysitting my grandbaby, and I don't have a car seat for him. The person on the phone said, just put him in the car with a seatbelt, he'll be okay. That's what she realized. Nobody from the IRS would really tell you that, right? So, I mean, she was lucky in that point, but she was actually on her way to pay the money. And, you know, the reason why we're in front of you is because, unfortunately, people have fallen for these things. All right, so definitely want to make sure you're careful. Yes, ma'am?
This was the story of the movie last year or the year before in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
The man had gotten one of those letters, and truly, he was probably my age, and truly believed that he had won, and it was a couple of states over, and his son couldn't convince him,
Right.
and he was going to walk. He was going to walk to that other state and get that money, so the son ended up taking him. And it was a nice story, but, you know,
Yeah.
based on true fact with some people.
Yeah, it can happen, and a lot of times it does look very believable. We're using a lot of high-tech stuff. The checks look and feel real. A lot of times tellers can't even tell when they first deposit it. The bank doesn't know until it tries to clear it through the normal way, and then it doesn't. So a lot of times it's very highly technical, very advanced stuff that they're using. They will a lot of times use logos from things that you're familiar with. So they might steal a logo from, what's the big Publishers Clearinghouse or something like that. Or so you recognize Publishers Clearinghouse, and then you become kind of comfortable. And so you believe it, and then they keep going. So there's a lot of ways that it happens, and you really have to stay on your toes.
So I wanted to say, do they have a list, if they can get people to respond to a lot of these, they're probably more vulnerable than the average person, because they want to hit, and it seems like they'd be easier fishing. They would prey on people that respond to a lot of them because they'll buy into it quicker.
Right.
And the other thing is, we don't have the Bitcoins here, but it seems like Bitcoins, you know, about Canada and stuff, I don't think they can be traced too, and that would probably be something that's coming up if they have them here, because they can't be traced, the money be going that quick too.
Right, right,
And that would
yeah.
be something that would be coming up to
Yeah,
use,
and
a
with
way of
those-
getting money instantly.
Right. With those things, there's always something new coming around the pike, always something that's different before. So yeah, Bitcoin is another one of those things it could be. You asked if there was a list?
Well, I mean, I think they would, you know how they sell information? I'm sure that people that are scammers would
Oh, yeah.
highly value people that are vulnerable. They got people like if somebody bites on something, then they'll keep at them at it.
Right.
Because
Yeah, that too.
the chances are easier than to just
When you
random.
think that, so we're in the information age, information is really readily available. Like if you guys are on the computer, if you ever go home and just Google your name, put your name in Google, hit enter, you'd be probably surprised at some of the stuff that comes up. But also, like we talked about, those different organizations that buy and sell your personal information, unfortunately, you know, they're not always selling to the good guys.
Right.
Right, so, there's a lot of times where your information is already out there. There are a lot of risks that they have and things like that.
They wouldn't care who they sold it to.
No. Mm-mm.
Money's money.
You don't care about the end result. Now, a lot of times they'll target seniors because they believe it's easier go.
Mhm.
Or that seniors either have this nest egg that everybody else doesn't have, or that they're more believing, or stuff like that.
More time in
So-
their hands too.
Mhm. So a lot of times we see that those are, who are targeted a lot, but anybody, whoever's willing to give money is a possible target. Yep. Additional questions about sweepstakes and lotteries. So we know the common sense stuff, right? Sounds too good to be true, it is. If you didn't play, you didn't win. You never have to pay in order to receive a prize. We don't send out wires or green dot money cards. All right? Okay, so estate planning. So, again, I'll give you a little bit more information about myself. First, I love the Philadelphia Eagles, although I have no idea what they're doing right now. Secondly, my favorite food is free food. Free food, yeah. Now, when it comes to free food, I am noticing there's not really so much of a free lunch anymore, right? Free dinner. There's always something that you're looking for. Has anybody here ever been, I'm sorry?
I have my rod's here.
Oh,
Okay. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Has anybody here ever been invited to one of those estate planning seminars in a restaurant, back at a restaurant or hotel lobby?
Yeah.
Right, and they promise you some type of free food, usually some cold meatloaf or something like that. But how free is it really? They do want something from you. It's the reason why they're offering you a meal for free. All right, so let's take a look at the scenario for estate planning, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay? You want me to start it?
I got this flyer in the mail about estate planning. The man who held the seminar was very interesting and seemed to know what he was talking about, and said that you need more than just a will. He said that going through probate would be a long and costly procedure, and that setting up this trust would probably be the best way to go. The man came to my house the very next day to help me with the paperwork. He looked over my investments. He told me I could get a better rate if I bought the annuities from him.
Okay, so estate planning. Now, for 2,000 bonus points, before we even start talking about estate planning, what did she do wrong in that video?
She didn't research it probably.
I heard this one for have him come to our house. So she had a person who she had met the night before, essentially a stranger, invited him to her home, and then said, "Here's all my personal and financial information." Right. So we never recommend anything like that. If you're going to go against Ameer's wonderful advice, then we recommend that use the buddy system. So have somebody else there in your home with you. Also, keynote, if you do something like that in your own home, so if you sign a financial contract like that in your own home, so not at the bank or at the estate planning seminar or anywhere else, you sign in your own home, you have what's called a 3-day right to rescind, meaning you have 3 business days, so weekends and major holidays don't count. Flag Day probably counts. All right, but you have 3 business days to decide you don't want to do that anymore. All right? You don't need a reason or anything like that. You can just go ahead and cancel the contract. Now, if you decide to use your 3-day right to rescind, a couple things. Make sure you take notes on it. So if you're calling Note the date you called, the time you called, who you spoke to, whether you left a message, you wrote a letter, email, whatever you did, make sure you take notes on it, so if it's ever asked about, you'll have that information. But you do have your 3-day right to rescind if you sign a contract like that in your own home. Now, when it comes to those estate planning seminars, we're not saying anybody and everybody who has a traveling estate planning seminar is the bad guy. However, if you do sign one of those, which tends to be really complex financial contracts dealing with things like annuities and wills, things like that, if you have a question 2 or 3 weeks later, how easy are they going to be to get in touch with you, right? That's a big question that you would have. A couple other things with these traveling estate planning seminars. We always recommend that you have a second set of eyes look over anything like that before you sign it and decide to go with it, whether that be a financial planner or a lawyer or just a family member who's familiar with the products. But you want somebody else who's looking out for you to look over it and make sure everything's in good order, all right? Another token of Ameer's advice. This is a guarantee I'll make for you. Whenever you're ready to spend your money, there's somebody that's going to be willing to take it. I promise you that, okay? Why do I say that? Well, a lot of times we see that they'll use high-pressure sales tactics to try to make sure you sign right away before they leave. This is the last time this offer will ever be offered. This is the best offer anybody's ever seen before. You won't be able to get it tomorrow. This is the only time, right? They want you to sign with them. They want your money before they leave. Don't do it on their time. Do it on your time. I promise you that when you're ready to spend your money, somebody's going to be willing to take it. So make sure you take that extra time to become comfortable with it, that you have another set of eyes look it over for you, all right? One other thing I want you to watch out for is, we saw in this video, they'll use high-pressure sales tactics a lot. Sometimes, once in a while, this is not everybody, but they could just outright lie. So in the video, he said she didn't want to have a will because it would have to go through probate, and it would be a long and expensive process, right? So we know wills do go through probate, but it's not necessarily a long or expensive process. He just said that because he wanted her to go with his product. All right, so that's another thing you want to watch out for. That's a big reason why you want to take your time and have another set of eyes look over it for you. All right, questions or concerns with estate planning? Yes, ma'am.
If you go with a lawyer, I'm sorry, if you go with a lawyer though, that's a different story, right? I mean, if you're talking to a lawyer.
What you mean, different story?
If you're doing estate planning with a lawyer.
Okay, yeah,
And
yeah.
you're working one-on-one with
Right,
them.
right. Yeah, well, I talked a little bit more about those, the traveling estate planning seminars. But I don't think in any case it's necessarily bad to have that second set of eyes, look over something for you, and take your time. Either way, make sure you're doing it on your schedule, what makes you comfortable.
Right.
Make sure you have a full understanding, no matter who you're doing. Question?
Well, you get those things in the mail every so often,
Mhm.
but for that kind of thing, and then for buying vacation homes
Sure.
or going into a senior development somewhere, and it sounds like a lovely evening, but we don't even think about it anymore because you figure it's gonna be too much trouble. You have a nice meal and then you're anxious and then you're sitting there having to say no, no, no.
Right. Yeah, so it's an idea that how free is it really, right?
Mhm.
They're offering you what they call a free meal, but there's something on the back end that you're paying, whether it be time or access to information or what have you. So it's definitely something to think about when it comes to those. Yep. Thank you very much. Additional questions? All right, so moving right along. Checks and money orders. So we're going to be introduced to what we call the overpayment scam. Overpayment scam usually happens if you've ever tried to buy or sell anything over the classifieds or online or anything like that. All right, so we'll take a look at this scenario and then we'll talk about the overpayment scam.
I decided to sell my motorcycle online to make some extra money. A friend of mine told me about a website where I could advertise it for free. Well, within a day, I had a buyer. He emailed me and told me he was sending a business check for $500 more than I was asking. He said I should send the extra money to a delivery company as soon as possible so they could pick it up. I was just happy to sell the motorcycle.
All right, so what we just witnessed is what we call the overpayment scam. So let's go over it. We had our friend Buzzy who was selling a motorcycle. Now, overpayment scam can happen when you're selling or buying anything, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a motorcycle. It could be furniture, dishware, anything you want to sell. Hats, there you go. So what happened was he posted his motorcycle, he posted it online, said he was selling it for $2,000. Now, without meeting him, without talking to anybody, he got a phone call from a gentleman who said two great things. First, I want to buy a motorcycle, check's already in the mail. Then it must have been Buzz's lucky day because he said, I gave you an extra $500. So he's giving money away, jackpot, right? So he's giving $500 more than Buzz even asked for. Again, always some strings attached. So in this case, he said, listen, I can't come to pick it up, so do me a favor. Call this delivery company, give them the extra $500, they'll come get the motorcycle, I'll have my motorcycle, you'll have your money, everybody's happy. All right? Let's think about it. Do you think there's really a delivery company? Probably not, right? Buzz is going to call somebody and give away his hard-earned money. That $2,500 check that's coming, you think it's going to be a good check? Nope. Right? It's going to go in his account. Everything's going to bounce. Again, he's in a lot of trouble with that. So how do you protect yourself when it comes to the overpayment scam? Couple things. Number one, always be leery if somebody doesn't want to meet or can't meet or anything like that, or they just send money to you without even seeing the product or talking to you or anything like that. So you're going to be leery of that. Secondly, if you're dealing with anyone who you don't necessarily know, you can let your bank know that, hey, I'm depositing this check. Don't allow any access to the funds until the check totally clears. That way you can keep yourself from really messing up your account. All right? Thirdly, you never want to act as a third party in that situation. So the sale should be between two people, right? Buzz and the person who called. But now the person who called is asking Buzz to go through somebody else and send them money to pick up the motorcycle. All right, so you always want to, if anybody does ask you to do that, you'll become leery. There's some red flags, and that's just not something that you want to do. All right, always be leery if somebody tells you they're giving you extra money, right? I haven't had that situation where people have decided they want to give me extra money. If you have, please make sure I get that person's information before I leave today. So if somebody's giving away money, something just doesn't seem right about that. All right, so now they can ask you in any number of ways to deal with the third party or something like that. So they might not say, I need a delivery company. They might say, my secretary wrote out the check and she wrote the wrong amount, just send back the extra money once you deposit the check. Right? Seems a little bit weird. You could just rip up a check and write a new one if that did happen. So if it sounds too good to be true, again, it probably is. Also, whenever you're dealing with anyone in that whole buying and selling classifieds or online or however you do it, a couple things about that. Never meet at your own home. Never let the other person decide where you're going to meet. Always meet during the day and in a busy area. Okay? Questions or concerns about overpayment scam? All right, so moving right along, home improvements. So one thing that's been happening in our state and that the Attorney General's office has taken steps to improve is there's been a lot of bad business with contractors. Because of that, there's now what's called the Home Improvement Consumer Protection Act, or HICPA. It protects you and the contractor. So it's a lot of information that's helpful to you whenever it comes to dealing with a contractor. All right, so we'll go over that. Has anybody here ever had a situation where you might have been outside gardening or something like that, and somebody in the pickup pulled up and said they can do some work to your landscaping or some work on your roof or anything like that, but unsolicited?
The driveway, they
Yeah.
have leftover.
Yeah, exactly.
Might
They
that
have
might be okay.
leftover material from another job and they can do it for cheap for you. All right, so those are some types of situations that happen with contractors. So let's take a look at this scenario, and then we'll talk about home improvement.
I was pulling some weeds around the house one morning and a nice young man approached me. He noticed that my roof was in need of some repair. I knew he was right, but I'd been putting off the expense of fixing it for some time. However, he said that he had some roofing materials left over from a previous job and he offered me a very good deal. He even said that I only needed to pay him half the money up front. And he gave me a receipt on the back of his business card. The work was supposed to start last week, but I'm still waiting for him to show up.
She's probably still waiting for him to show up. Right? All right, so when it comes to home improvement, I'll start by asking you this question. How hard is it to get a couple of business cards that say you're in the home improvement or you're a roofer?
Yeah, you can print them out yourself and everything.
Right.
Computer.
Print them out yourself, you could go to VistaPrint or something like that. I could probably have business cards that say I'm the President of the United States within 48 hours, right? They probably look pretty good, but it's pretty easy to get those business cards. How easy would it be to put some stickers or awning on the side of my car that says I'm a roofer or a contractor, right? Probably pretty easy, all right? So, again, when it comes to dealing with contractors, you have to do a little bit more homework. Number one thing is, you should always be leery, cause you have some red flags if anybody unsolicited comes to you and tells you they can do work on your home, all right? Not necessarily the bad guy, but it should cause some red flags and you should probably be skeptical, okay? Now, when it comes to the Home Improvement Consumer Protection Act, or HICPA, there's a couple things in there designed to protect you, protect the contractor. First things first, if you're having work done on your home or anything like that, always get a contract that protects you, protects the contractor. Now, with HICPA, there's some things that have to go on the contract, all right? First thing is, every contractor that does work in the state of Pennsylvania, so they don't even have to be in Pennsylvania, but if they do work in Pennsylvania, $5,000 or more per year, they have to be registered with our office. So every contractor should have a registration number with our office. You can call our office and check that they're registered. Now, as far as that registration number, what it tells you, when they're registered with our office, it doesn't necessarily mean we stand behind their work or they do A+ work. It does mean if we need to find them, we know where to find them. All right, so because they're registered with us, doesn't necessarily mean they're the guy to go with, but if they're not registered with us, then I wouldn't use them at all. So back to the contract, a couple things that have to go on the contract. Number one, their registration number with our office has to go on the contract. Also, any subcontractors that they're working with, their registration number has to go on the contract. The exact work being done, the cost, and the approximate dates of starting and beginning also have to be on the contract. All right, so you always want to look for all that information. Question?
Does the contract also have to state whether or not they have insurance?
It doesn't have to state that whether or not they have insurance, but that's something that you should check on when you're using any contractor, whether or not they have insurance, what their insurance is.
Insured and bonded?
Insured and bonded, correct.
What does that mean, bonded? It's like insured and bonded. What does that mean? Are you either, sometimes you can just say they're insured, but that bonded, what does that part of it mean?
The bonded part, and I'm not an attorney or anything, so I don't want to give you any misinformation. As far as I know, it's the way they're covered and the money that's available for their coverage.
Okay.
But let me check that for you before we leave today, just to make sure I give you the right information.
Thank you.
All right. So
I think it works like bail bond. They post the bond in a certain amount of money, and if you don't perform the act you have agreed to perform, then the bond is withdrawn.
right. So there's the money that's available.
So they put so much money aside, the contractor?
You post so much for bond, and it's different prices, just like bail when someone's in jail, and the judge says, I'll release them on $100,000 bail.
Okay.
someone pays the $100,000.
or a portion of that.
Right, if he says 10%, he pays the 10,000. If the guy doesn't show up for trial, then the bail bondsman has to pay that money.
Yeah,
The guy who gave them the bond.
okay.
So I'll check for you, so you have a good definition too. All right, a couple other things when it comes to
Thank you.
home improvement and dealing with contractors that do not call, I'm going way back. That 3-day right to rescind that we talked about before, you have that when it comes to doing work on your home, all right? The only way it doesn't apply is if they're doing emergency work. So like, you have a flooded basement and they have to begin right away. And obviously the 3-day right to rescind wouldn't apply there.
If you sign a contract, say at Lowe's,
Right.
does the 3-day rescission
On
stand
the home, yes.
on all home improvements regardless of where you sign the
Mhm.
contract?
Also, like we said, anybody who shows up unsolicited, you want to be leery of. So we've had cases where person shows up to a home, tells the lady, shows her shingles, and says, these are shingles from your roof. They're obviously damaged. You need this work done. I was working on a job in the neighborhood. I already have the materials. I can do it for really cheap for you. Come to find out, the shingles that he showed her were a different color than the actual shingles on her roof. All right, so that's why we say that's something you want to be really skeptical of. When it comes to having that work done, you want to go through a little bit of like a bid process, so get 3 or 4 statements on pricing and the work that needs to be done. Make sure you check reviews for contractors and things like that. There's some websites that you can go to check that. There's also like the Better Business Bureau and a couple other
Angie's
places.
List.
Yeah, Angie's List and things like that. All right, so there's a couple different places you can go to check, but you want to make sure you check. Now, another interesting thing, do you remember in the video how much he charged up front?
The half?
He charged her half. The rule actually states that if the job is $5,000 or over, you don't have to pay more than a third up front. So we recommend the third rule, third up front, third at the halfway point, and a third after they finish, once you've reviewed and make sure everything is okay. All right, but you don't have to pay half up front. Now, they can request that you pay up front any customized work that you're having done. So if you're having like a 13 by 13 foot stained glass window with a picture of yourself in there, they can't put that in another home, right? So you could have to pay for that up front in full, but all of the work that they're doing, the third rule. All right? Make sure you're checking with the contractors. Make sure you're doing that bid process and getting a few different bids. Make sure you're checking reviews. Make sure all the information we talked about is on the contract. All right? Questions or concerns on home improvement? Yes, ma'am.
You know, now that we can pick our own electric supplier as opposed to PICO, you know, we've had, I think, 3 different people come to the house. They usually come in the early evening when it's dark, and many times when it's raining, and they are so pushy, and they want, you know, they'll give you a better price, you know, per kilowatt hour or whatever it is, and they insisted that you go and get your last bill, and then they'll look at it and they can help you with it. And we actually had to say, go away and close the door. They were so pushy, young people. When we had talked to I called the supplier that we had about it afterwards, after the first one came, and he said, you didn't show them your bill, did you? And we said, no. And he said, if you do, they can then say that you have agreed to go with them. That you, because they have all your information.
A bill?
Yeah, like if you.
Oh, you're saying, so they
else,
call they call the supplier herself and say, we have the information, she wants to change or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple things. One is, and that's kind of been a reoccurring theme, that you don't want to show or give your personal information, especially if somebody comes to you unsolicited. Another thing, you might want to check with like your local state rep too, because one thing I found out in a meeting I had probably 2 weeks ago is that depending on where you are, they may have to have a license in order to go door to door like that. So you can ask to see their license, and if they don't have it, they're definitely out of compliance. And you don't need to deal with them. So that's one thing to check on. Thirdly, and this probably, there's a unit within the Attorney General's office called the Office of the Consumer Advocate. That advocate deals with any issues that you could have with utility organizations. So if you got into a problem with them, you could go through our Office of the Consumer Advocate.
I remember seeing that in one of the letters.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's one thing you can do, but again, definitely don't give them any personal information. You really don't have to open the door, and they could be out of compliance depending on where you are and what licenses they have.
I think they came, I thought afterwards, they came when it was raining, I don't know how they managed that. But then to make you feel bad, because they were young people and it was pouring out there and it was dark, and you,
Don't feel
come on
bad.
in,
Don't
We-
feel
A couple
bad, feel
neighbors
safe.
did do that, though, they did give them that.
Playing
Yeah.
on your sympathy.
I don't have as much as I used to.
No, I don't either.
All right, but yeah, so, and that's something that could happen now with deregulation, that those organizations could, come and knock it, but make sure you handle it the right way. It sounds like you did, but you have a couple tools when it comes to that too. Additional questions about home improvement?
What do you do too? Would you threaten just to call the police if they're not gonna move? I mean, if it gets that,
When you get really angry with them and say, go and close the door.
that's all you needed?
Yeah, you can in that situation, and you're well within your rights.
Especially seniors, so
Right.
I'd be concerned.
Yeah, and sometimes, like you said, they'll play on our emotions and we'll feel bad, so we might give them a little bit more of a chance or let them stay when you said you don't really want it and you don't want to, don't worry about that. If they're there and you don't want them there, they need to leave. If they're not, then you can go ahead and call the
Yeah,
authorities.
you could always pick up the phone and say you're going to, certainly.
Yeah. Sure. Good. Okay. Moving on to account verification. Now, this is a tricky one. Has anyone ever received a call that said, they'll ask you, did you purchase something on your account, and you have no idea what it is, and you tell the bank, no, I didn't purchase it. A lot of times they'll say, okay, we'll take it off your account. We didn't think it was you anyway. So you're relieved. But I'm going to show you how that can be a little bit of a tricky situation, and sometimes we can end up giving even more information out. All right? So let's check this account verification. We have power of attorney, we're set for the day.
I shred my bank statements and canceled checks, and I never carry my Social Security card in my wallet. I got a telephone call from bank officer recently asking if I had purchased a $400 camcorder. I told him that absolutely not. I hesitated because I thought this was a scam. However, he had my name, address, and the credit card number. He merely wanted me to verify this 3-digit security code on the back of the credit card. Since he already had all of the pertinent information about my name, address, and credit card number, I gave him the 3-digit security code so that I could be sure the $400 was removed from my credit card.
Okay, so like I said, that was a little bit of a tricky situation. So you have Bill, who's really pretty good. He pays, or he doesn't leave bills around. He shreds information. So he's usually somebody that wouldn't suspect any type of card compromise or ID theft or anything like that. He received a call one day. Call asked him, did you buy this $400 camcorder? He said, of course I didn't. Person said, we'll take it right off your account. So right then Bill's relieved, right? Because he's relieved, he's probably gonna give them any information they ask for. So they said, just to make sure it's you before we go, could you give us the 3-digit security code on the back of your card? And if you ever tried to purchase anything where you weren't there, so over the phone or on the computer, you always need that 3-digit security code. It's supposed to be security for you. Of course, he didn't want to pay that $400, so he gave them exactly what they asked for, and that's when his card was compromised. All right, so how do you protect yourself in that case? Well, there's a couple things you can do. Biggest thing to remember is your bank, your financial institution, will not call you and ask you for your own personal information, right? They should already have it anyway, but they won't call you and ask you to verify your information. If you get a call like that and they're asking you to verify your own information, red flag, right? It's starting to sound a little bit weird. What could he have done in order to protect himself? What Bill could have done, when he got that call, remember we already talked about you can't necessarily trust caller ID, right? And he doesn't know who he's talking to yet on the phone. So what he could have done is politely or impolitely, it's up to you, hang up the phone. He could have gotten one of his statements or an old bill, or he could have taken his card out of his pocket and called the 1-800 number. The card always has a 1-800 number on the back of it. Or he could have went out and actually went to his financial institution. All of those ways, he's confirming who he's speaking to before he gives any information. All right, so you can tell a person on the phone, you know what, I'll call you right back. You don't want to necessarily use the phone number to call back that they give you, right? Because they could be giving you the phone number to somebody standing right next to them. We saw that room with all those people calling out, all right? But you want to confirm who you're speaking to, right? And the way you confirm that, like I said, statement, bill, 1-800 number on the back of your car, anything like that. But you don't want to give that personal information out. And that doesn't just go for the phone call. Same thing if you get an email or anything like that, all right? Make sure you're going to the right people. Don't click on the link in the email. Just go up to the top of the web browser and type in the website yourself, http://www. and so on. That way you're confirming who you're talking to. Quick note, if you're doing something like that online and you're putting all that information in on the computer, whenever you get to a page on the computer where you have to put in any personal information, username, password, anything like that, you should see in the browser where the http:// all that stuff is, a picture of a little lock. That lock means it's a secure website and that you can go ahead and enter that information. If you don't see that picture up there, then don't put your information in.
Doesn't it have to have the S, HTTPS?
HTTPS, yeah, I'm sorry, I always forget the S.
Yeah.
My apologies. Right. So you want to write all that in. Don't click on links that come to your email. Don't open emails from people you don't know. When it comes to receiving phone calls, never give any of your personal information away. They shouldn't be asking for personal information if they already have it, if it's your bank or your financial institution. What happened in this case was Bill was in a market, he was in line, he was waiting to pay, and he had his card in his hand. And somebody had a phone, snapped a picture of his card, and if you've ever tried to purchase anything without being there, you know they need the security number on the back of his card. So that's how they went about getting it. All right, so want to make sure you're watching out for that. Definitely don't want to give out any personal information over the phone. All right, questions about account verification? All right. So power of attorney. Power of attorney is actually interesting. We have an elder abuse line. It's a line that you can call for our office if you or anyone you know is going through any type of abuse, whether it be physical, financial, anything like that. The number is 1-866-623-2137. You'll also see it in our closing, and if you get one of those senior brochures, it's in there also. So the call that our office probably gets the most on the elder abuse line has to do with someone taking advantage of power of attorney. And unfortunately, a lot of times, it's a friend or a family member who had power of attorney in the first place. All right, so I want to show you some information on our scenario on power of attorney, and then we'll come back and talk about some misconceptions.
Things were getting hard for me
I needed help around the house, and I needed help financially. The money was coming in, but I just couldn't stay on top of my bills. My daughter lived nearby. She came and helped me get my house back in order. I then turned power of attorney over to her, and she helped to get my bills in order. One day, my son came to visit and started to go through my financial papers. He noticed that huge sums of money had been taken out every few days. I told him that I had given his sister power of attorney. My son then started to go through all of my financial papers and soon discovered that my daughter had used this power of attorney to gain access to my money. My son wants me to call the police, but what can I do? She is my daughter, and I did give her the power of attorney.
Okay, so that's a scenario we probably see more often than we like. There's a couple misconceptions about power of attorney though, so just to go over those really quick. First misconception that we see is once I sign over power of attorney, I no longer have any say on what goes on the account. I'm powerless to do anything. That couldn't be further from the truth. You never actually give up ownership of your account. In fact, you still have the responsibility to know what's going on. So one thing we recommend is you have 2 sets of statements go out every month. If you're doing power of attorney, so one will go to you and one goes to your power of attorney, so you can keep a handle on it. Or if you have online access, you can go online and check daily if you want to. All right, but you should definitely still know what's going on with your account. Second misconception that we see is people say, well, I didn't think once I had power of attorney that I could change it. You can always change your power of attorney, especially if you're feeling uncomfortable or something illegal is going on. We always recommend both when you're first doing the power of attorney and if you decide to switch it, that you go through an elder law attorney, because there's a lot of ins and outs to it. There's, it can get pretty complicated, triggers and things like that that are in your power of attorney clause. So we recommend you go through an elder law attorney, but you can always change it if need be. Now there's a couple of rules that govern kind of how that power of attorney acts on your account. First thing is, can never be any commingling of funds. By commingling of funds, I mean your funds and your power of attorney funds can never be in the same account. They always have to be separate. Secondly, you want to pick someone who is well organized, because they could at any time have to produce statements, bills, receipts, anything like that that pertains to the account. So you do want to pick someone who's pretty well organized when it comes to that. Thirdly, every transaction that happens on the account has to be for your benefit. So your power of attorney couldn't say, well, grandmom will want all 3 of the triplets to have birthday presents, so I'm just going to go out and buy them all birthday presents from the account. Right? They can't do that because every transaction has to be for your benefit. All right? When it comes to choosing a power of attorney, you want to remember it's not necessarily a popularity contest. So you don't want to necessarily choose the person you like the most. You want to choose somebody who is financially stable, so they don't view it as a temptation to do something they shouldn't with your account. And you want to choose somebody who's well organized. All right? Again, if you do see anything that you don't like, that makes you uncomfortable, or you know something is going on that shouldn't be happening with that account, you can always call our elder abuse unit, and we can start the investigation. Now, depending on what it is, they might have to have you go through your area agency on aging or something like that, depending on what the jurisdiction is. But you should always start by calling our office. All right? So you'll see that number again in a second, and it's in our pamphlets. One last thing I wanted to talk to you about before I go, we don't have a video for, but it's something that has been going around, and we actually made a pretty big arrest on it in Philadelphia this past summer. It's called the grandparent scam. So the way the grandparent scam works is usually you'll receive a phone call. So it could be an email, could be a knock on the door. It tends to be a phone call though. The phone call tends to come late at night or at a time where you should probably be asleep. So let's say 10 p.m. or later. So what happens is, phone rings, you're asleep, wakes you out your sleep, you're probably a little bit disoriented, trying to gather your thoughts. You pick up the phone, person on the other end of the line says, "Hey grandmom," or "Hey grandpa, it's me, your grandson." And then you're still trying to, wake up a little bit, so you might say that your grandson's name. They'll say, "Johnny?" And they'll say, "Yes, of course it's Johnny." He'll say, "Listen, I was out partying, we were in Mexico, we got into some trouble, and I'm in jail. I need you to send me, wire," remember that word? "Wire me $2,000 for bail, or I'll be stuck in jail here for the next 2 years. Oh, but whatever you do, make sure you don't call mom and dad." All right? So you don't want little Johnny to be in trouble. You run out to the nearest market or pharmacy as fast as you can. You go against Ameer's advice, and you send the wire. You don't want to snitch on Johnny either, so you don't tell mom and dad. And all the time, Johnny's actually in his bedroom, sleep, or in his dorm room playing video games. All right? So when it comes to that, you want to make sure, one, you're thinking clearly. Secondly, that you're not in so much of a rush that you make bad judgments, right? Thirdly, I don't care what they say, call Johnny, call his parents, make sure he's okay. If he never asked you to wire him money before, why is he asking now? All right? Also, remember we talked about the candy being the same, but the wrapper being different? So they might not say, "I'm Johnny and I'm in jail." You might get a call from Johnny's lawyer who says, "This is the retainer you need to pay me because Johnny's in jail." Or maybe Johnny got a flat tire on the side of the road and he needs money right away. So the wrapper can always change, can always be a little bit different. But what you see that remains the same is unsolicited call, somebody that you care about is in trouble, and they need money right away, maybe information, all right? I'll leave you with this. When it comes to thinking about if something that's happening to you is a scam, think of that acronym of scam, SCAM. So if it's SC, sudden contact, A, act now, M, money or information is needed. If you start to see that pattern lining up, sudden contact, you gotta act now, money or information is needed, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. More than likely, it's a duck, right? So, thank you for your time this afternoon. I'm going to show you a closing from Attorney General Kane, and I'll be here for a while if you have any questions, all right?
Thank you.
I hope this information has given you a better understanding of the scams you might encounter. These criminals are experienced and extremely good at carrying out these frauds. If you've been victimized or know a senior who has been a victim, please don't hesitate to contact my office. You can reach the Elder Abuse Unit at 1-866-623-2137. I'm asking for your help in reporting scams so that my office can prosecute those who prey on older Pennsylvanians. We also have information in booklets and brochures that we would be happy to send you. Or you can download the information by using our website at www.attorneygeneral.gov. Remember, by reporting any suspicious activity, you're helping us put an end to these types of crimes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one comment.
Sure.
On power of attorney, because I've worked for attorneys for 40 years. And the power of attorney is probably the most powerful document you will ever sign. That gives a lot of leeway to somebody else that wants to take advantage of it. You can, however, revoke it at any time. You do a revocation of power of attorney anytime you want. But it's very complicated once they take all that money and do what they want.
It
You have
is.
to go through hoops for it, like you said.
It is. It can be definitely complicated. That's a lot of times why we say go through an attorney to even get it set up. Because I know some attorneys will do stuff like they'll put gift clauses in there where you can't give over a certain amount when it comes to gifts. They might do something different. Depending on the financial institution that you go to, they might require their own paperwork. So it can get pretty complicated.
And you can do limited powers of attorney.
Sure.
Say that you want your son to represent you at your house settlement. you can do a limited power of attorney that gives him the authority to just do this settlement for you.
Sure.
And he can't do anything else. But it's a very powerful document.
Great information, thank you.